Hello everyone, this is American class number 7. Today we are going to discuss modernism and experimentation, and it will cover the years from 1914 to 1945. These are the years of the First and the Second World Wars. The outline is modernism, poetry 1914 to 1945. T.S. Eliot, he's a very famous and influential American poet, although some believe that he stayed most of his time in England. And the period between the wars, Robinson Jeffers and Ernest Hemingway. We are going to focus on these writers. Many historians have characterized the period between the two world wars as the United States' traumatic coming of age. What does this mean? Because the Americans were quiet for a considerable period of time, all of a sudden they got engaged in the wars. Their children suffered the war beyond the seas or overseas. With their allies, with their European allies, and also because of this cultural affinity with Europe, they believe that they still feel they are part of Europe, and also because of the Great Depression in 1929. So all these years with what they had are called traumatic coming of age, the maturity that came through trauma, They became mature because of trauma, or the trauma that made them mature, despite the fact that the U.S. direct involvement was relatively brief, The U.S. joined the wars, the first war and the second war, in the final years. And despite the fact that their casualties many fewer than those of its European allies and foes. John Dos Passos expressed America's post-war disillusionment. Disillusionment means that to see the truth with your eyes after a period of being blind, or to see the reality as it is after being blinded by dogmas, by ideologies, by public narratives, mega narratives, etc., etc. Disillusionment in the novel Three Soldiers. This novel is called or entitled Three Soldiers, when he noted that civilization was a vast edifice of sham, and the war, instead of its crumbling, was its fullest and most ultimate expression. So this disillusionment, is explained by these words. Civilization is vast edifice, is a huge structure, of sham, fake images, fake perception, fake understanding, hocus pocus understanding of life. And the war, instead of its crumbling, instead of disillusioning people about life, in fact, the war was the fullest form of this disillusionment, Shocked and permanently changed, Americans returned to their homeland but could never again regain their innocence. They became traumatized, they became disillusioned, they became angry about the way they lead their own life. Nor could soldiers from rural America easily return to their roots. They got disconnected, After experiencing the world, many now yearned for a modern urban life. They went to Europe, they had different experiences, they started to think of city life. Urban life more or less means city life. New farm machines such as planters, harvesters, and binders had drastically reduced the demand for farm jobs. Yet, despite their increased productivity, farmers were poor. Now, despite the technological advancement, the farmers were poor, and this affected the way of life. And if you refer to Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, you can see how agriculture was affected during these times. Okay? Crop prices, like urban workers' wages, dependent on unrestrained market forces, heavily influenced by business interests. There is this laissez-faire doctrine in the American culture, which means free market. It affected the way people sell and buy drastically during these times, leading to the Great Depression in 1929. The Great Depression, like economic recession, big economic recession. Okay? Government subsidies, the support of the government. Government subsidies for farmers and effective workers' unions had not yet become established. And because of there were no rules to govern the relationship between the different classes of the society, the factors, the industrialist and the farmer, all these affected production and level of life. The chief business of the American people is business. Now everybody is looking for business, and this was called. This phrase was delivered by the American President Calvin Coolidge. Okay, and he received the consent, the agreement of others. In the post-war big boom, business flourished. After the war, there is an emergence of new businesses, new factories, new opportunities, and the successful prospered beyond their wildest dreams. All these changes will affect the way people think and consequently will affect the way people write, okay, as we will demonstrate shortly. For the first time, many Americans enrolled in higher education. In the 1920s, college enrollment, college here means university, okay? College enrollment doubled. The middle class prospered. Americans began to enjoy the world's highest national average income in this era. And many people purchased the ultimate status symbol, or which is the automobile, the car. They started to have this symbol of civilization at the time as the ultimate expression of prosperity. Okay? The typical urban American home glowed with electric lights. Remember, it was Edison who invented electricity, and people boasted about their ability to lighten their house. And the radio that connected the house with the outside world, and perhaps a telephone or a camera or a typewriter or a sewing machine, all these were new techniques, new ways of life, new machines that made the life easy, and that will affect, as we've mentioned, the ways of thinking, consequently demonstrated in the ways of expression and writing. Like the businessman, protagonist of Sinclair Lewis's novel Babbitt, okay, the average American approved of these machines because they were modern and because most were American inventions and American made. So America at the time is a nation in a making, a nation in the making, a new nation in the making, in a new shape, okay? This is why 20s were called roaring 20s. Roaring 20s, full of new things. The 1920s, full of new things. And here, the Americans fell in love with other modern entertainments. Most people went to the movie once a week. Okay, they were excited with the cinema, excited with the camera, excited with electricity, okay? Although prohibition refers to the nationwide ban on the production, transport, and sale of alcohol that was instituted through the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which began in 1919. Because Americans were in roaring 20s, they exaggerated in drinking. So there had to be a law, a rule that at least decrease or limit this insatiable approach to drinking, okay? However, this did not actually succeed immediately, okay? People resorted to underground speakeasies. If you see speakeasy in these times, this means that you are going to buy or drink alcohol illegally, okay? Speakeasy places, like nightclubs that proliferated, they became so many, featuring jazz music, cocktails, and daring modes of dress and dance. Daring modes, people started to strip their clothes and they started to dance crazily, okay, in these places. Dancing, movie going, automobile touring, and radio were national crazes. American women in the party felt liberated. Many had left farms and villages for home front duty in American cities during World War I and had become resolutely modern. They were determined to appear as modern as they could. They cut their hair short, bobbed, wore short flapper. Short flapper is any jacket or any dress you wear in a way that shows confidence, that shows your own personality, as many teenagers would do these days, and gloried in the right to vote assured by the 19th Amendment to the Constitution passed in 1920. They boldly spoke their mind and took public roles in society. So this is the meaning of roaring 20s, okay? Now, all these things led to modernism. A people, a nation in taking a new shape, okay, cutting ties with history, trying to cut ties with history, okay, determined to establish its own voice, to establish its own image, okay, self-image, self-conception. All these led to what we know as modernism, okay? The large cultural wave of modernism which gradually emerged in Europe and the United States in the early years of the 20th century expressed a sense of modern life through art, okay? Of course, modernism is a manner of expression or a technique of expression. It will take place in all modes of expression, in art, in writing, in novel writing, in poetry, okay? And also in production, cinema production, movie production. Modernism permeates all man-invented things in 20th century, okay? And it's premised on sharp break from the past as well as from Western civilization's classical traditions. They wanted to invent their new ways of life. Modern life seemed radically different from traditional life, more scientific, faster, more technological, and more machinized, okay? Modernism embraced these changes. Science, fast action, technology, okay? In literature, Gertrude Stein developed an analog to modern art. A resident of Paris, she lived in Paris, and an art collector, she and her brother Leo purchased works of the artists Paul Gazzini, Paul Gauguin, and Pierre Auguste, and also Pablo Picasso, and many others, okay? She is American, living in Paris, collecting art, okay? This is in order to be consistent with modernist approaches to everything. Stein once explained that she and Picasso were doing the same thing. He in art, she in writing, okay? So this is to give you an example of how modernism permeates all human activities at the time. Picasso came and turned the tradition of painting upside down with his new Wayne Cubist approach, etc., etc. Using simple, concrete words as counters. She developed an abstract experimental prose poetry. She might write erroneous sentences in order to say this is modernist, to depart away from grammatical rules, as we will see in a poem that she wrote before. Okay, the childlike quality of Stein's simple vocabulary recalls the bright primary colors of modern art, while her repetitions echo the repeated shapes of abstract visual compositions. By dislocating grammar and punctuation, she doesn't use punctuation as others do, according to rules, okay? She achieved new abstract meanings, as in her influential collection Tender Buttons, which she published in 1914, and in which she views objects from different angles, as in a Cubist painting. Look at this. A table means does it? Okay? Not my dear, it means a whole steadiness. Is it likely that a change? A table means more than a glass. Even a looking glass is tall. So if you look at this picture by Picasso, there is a picture by Picasso, we'll come to it. You will see how grammar, how she is focused on the table that is the least noticed in the room. But she takes notice. She makes sure that this table is something you need to take care of, you need to contemplate. Okay? It means a whole steadiness. Everything moves, people get in, get out. The table is steadfast. It is resilient in the room. Okay? Vision and viewpoint became an essential aspect of the modernist novel as well. Vision and viewpoint. Viewpoint is a very important thing here. Okay? The angle from which you look at the situation. No longer was it sufficient to write a straightforward third-person narrative. The third-person narrative, they go, they went, etc., etc. Use a pointlessly intrusive narrator, a narrator who would use his own first-person language, first-person description, or also get involved in the interpretation of the situation. The way the story was told became as important as the story itself, the form. The Americans experimented very much with the form. As William Faulkner, as we will see how The Sound and the Fury is offered by 4 narrators in 4 chapters. Okay? Henry James, William Faulkner, and many other American writers experimented with fictional points of view. Some are still doing so. Henry James is a very, very important writer. We will come to him soon. James often restricted the information in the novel to what a single character would have known. Faulkner's novel, The Sound and the Fury, breaks up the narratives into 4 sections, each giving the viewpoint of a different character, including a mentally retarded boy. Okay? In his novel, The Sound and the Fury, William Faulkner opens his novel with a long chapter narrated by a mentally retarded character who cannot remember things smoothly. There is a lot of stream of consciousness, a lot of confusion in the way Benji, the narrator, offers the stream of events. Okay? To analyze such modernist novels and poetry, a school of new criticism arose in the United States. Once there is a production, this production needs to be explained, interpreted. New ways of writing entails new ways of interpretation, okay? New ways of criticism. This what we call new criticism, which emerged with a new critical vocabulary. New critics hunted the epiphany. Epiphany is the moment in which a character suddenly sees the transcendent truth of a situation, a term derived from a holy saint's appearance to mortals. It's like the manifestation or the euphoria of knowing new layers of truth in life. Okay, these critics examined and clarified a work, hoping to shed light upon it through their insights. We'll come to poetry now. The poetry, the experiments in poetry here mostly manifested in the experimentation with form. And one of the first people to experiment with form is Ezra Pound. He was one of the most influential American poets of his century. He was a translator too, and he translated from Chinese, and he has his own way of translation. We will come to this in advanced translation. From 1908 to 1920, he resided in London, where he associated with many writers, including William Butler Yeats, for whom he worked as a secretary, and T.S. Eliot, whose Wasteland is a very famous modernist poem written by T.S. Eliot while he was in London, although he is an American. Okay? Ezra Pound drastically edited the Wasteland and improved it. Okay? And it was to him that T.S. Eliot dedicated the poem. It's a very long poem. It's like it's written like in a book. He was a link, Ezra Pound, between the United States and Britain, acting as contributing editor to Harriet Monroe's important Chicago magazine Poetry and spearheading the new school of poetry known as Imagism, which advocated a clear, highly visual presentation. Imagism focuses on images, on visual approaches to poetry. After Imagism, he championed, he supported, advocated various poetic approaches. He eventually moved to Italy, where he became caught up in Italian fascism. This great mind, became fascist during Mussolini time in Italy. T.S. Eliot, his full name is Thomas Stearns Eliot. He was born in St. Louis, Missouri, to a well-to-do family with roots in the northern United States. He received the best education of any major American writer of his generation. He studied at Harvard, he studied at Sorbonne and Merton College of Oxford University. So you can see, deduce from this that he was multilingual. And the Wasteland is full of allusions and references. Allusion is a literary term. You need to check it, okay? Allusions and references to languages other than English. He studied Sanskrit and Oriental philosophy, which influenced his poetry. Like his friend Pound, he went to England early, and became a towering figure in the literary world there. One of the most respected poets of his day, his modernist, seemingly illogical or abstract iconoclastic poetry. Iconoclastic poetry, the poetry that does not abide by established rules. He goes against these rules, had revolutionary impact. He also wrote influential essays and dramas and championed the importance of literary and social traditions for the modern poet. As a critic, Eliot is best remembered for his formulation of objective correlative. Objective correlative is a literary term you need to check also, which he described in The Sacred Wood as a means of expressing emotion through a set of objects, a situation, a chain of events that would be the formula of that particular emotion. Poems such as the Love Song of J. Alfred Prufrock embody this approach when the influential or elderly Prufrock thinks to himself that he has measured out his life in coffee spoons. Look, if somebody is measuring out his life in coffee spoons, this is absurd, okay? using coffee spoons to reflect a humdrum existence and a wasted lifetime. He doesn't have anything to do except, yeah. The famous beginning of Eliot's Purfrook invites the reader into tawdry allies that, like modern life, offer no answers to the questions life poses. Look at the poem now. Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Patient, okay? Gloomy situation. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, no people. Life is empty. The muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels, okay? People are leading an upset life where they have no objective. Remember that was written in light of the catastrophes that hit Europe at the time. Similar imagery pervades the wasteland, which echoes Dante's Inferno to evoke London's thronged streets around the time of World War I. Unreal city, under the brown fog of a winter dawn, a crowd flowed over London Bridge, so many I had not thought death had undone so many. This portrays how life is gloomy, how it is difficult, how it is sad, okay? I will stop here and continue next class, but I will leave this for you to continue at Moodle, okay? For now, I'm giving a signal. Thank you very much.